Hello, vinyl community. It's Mazzy here, and we're talking 1970. A thread started by Ron Haggerty, which led to, I don't know what order, Blues Vinyl Guy and The Happy Hippie. Woke up middle of the night last night and watched all three, and this one hit a nerve. I know there's a lot of top 10 of different decades, different years, but 1970 was really a change in music, in history, in my personal life. So I'm going to kind of go through. I can't do a top 10. So this is not a top 10. And if you've watched my videos before, usually if I do a top 10 or 25, I rarely do it in any kind of order. I just throw them out there. So, you know, there are no rules in this stuff. It's all subjective, and it's all about personal things. So 1970 was the year the Beatles split up. It's the year I was 15 and 16 years old. I turned 16 in August, so I got my driver's license in August. Was in San Francisco, and it was the first time I fell in love. That summer, I was confirmed. Yes, Jews have a confirmation too. Some do. And in June and July of that year, I went to Israel. It was my first time leaving the country. First time of any length of time of leaving home. And going to Israel in 1970 was an amazing time for a lot of reasons, obviously, in terms of the geopolitical and the cultural, religious thing going on. I'm not a religious person anymore, but I am a cultural Jew. So that really, really changed things for me. This was, remember, just 3 years after the Six-Day War in Israel, and there was still some tempestuous things going on. But anyway, I'm going to show these records, and there's a lot of them here, so stop and start as you wish. I'll probably tell some personal stories. A couple things about 1970 was it is a perfect bookend. In a way, 1970 ended the 60s, so I would kind of argue the 60s ended midway, kind of, you know, when Let It Be came out, the Beatles' final released album, not recorded. Abbey Road was recorded after, which you probably already know that. And I'm not going to get in details. I'm going to get on a personal level. I was buying a lot of records, and I figured out of these records, probably 50 of them I actually bought in 1970. Most of these are my original copies. There's a few I got rid of over the years that I've repurchased. So it was a real change of things. I went through, growing up in San Francisco, the psychedelic period, obviously the British invasion before that, and it really changed with singer-songwriters were starting to emerge. Acoustic music was getting more popular, as well as some other things mixed in here. Groups were starting to do solo records, which is an important part of this, and you'll see me progress into that. And I noticed, like in Ron Haggerty's, he has a lot of heavy metal stuff. I don't think I have there's only two records that Ron showed that I have in my collection. I think it's Led Zeppelin and Led Zeppelin 3 and one of the, see, I can't even remember the biggest first is B. What is this? Oh God, you know, Black Sabbath. I wasn't into Black Sabbath till years later, so I'm not including either of those first two Black Sabbath albums. I wasn't really a heavy metal person, hard rock person, although I would argue with you, Ron. I think the first heavy metal album was 1968's Blue Cheer record, but I understand the whole thing really started going with after Led Zeppelin. A lot of people don't consider them heavy metal anyway. I was into Led Zeppelin, but that's another story. So I'm going to start with the first Beatle album that came out in 1970, which was actually a comp. Hey Jude in America, only America originally, and then it kind of expanded around the world. Alan Klein wanted this as a moneymaker. Compile all the excess extra singles like Hey Jude, Revolution, Paperback Writer, Lady Madonna, Rain, Ballad of John Yoko. Strange record in a way. Why would they put on I Should Have Known Better and Can't Buy Me Love? I know the whole singles thing, but really strange. From the last photo session Ethan Russell shot on John Lennon's ascot, I believe, right? His estate, as well, that you can see in the Imagine film. But still a great record, Apple Records. But I remember being in Los Angeles, and, well, first of all, Let It Be. The American copy was a gatefold. This is my original American copy from 1970. You know, all the tapes, they had a screw-up time during making this movie. They looked like they were bickering, breaking up. They put it on the shelf, went back in the studio, and ended up recording Abbey Road, released that. Then Lennon gave the tapes to Phil Spector, and he did this. I happen to like the record. I mean, especially songs like I've Got a Feeling, One After 909, and I Dig a Pony, Two of Us. I mean, Across the Universe, one of the best lyrics John Lennon ever wrote. Great album. I know years later, McCartney initiated the Beatles putting Let It Be Naked, stripped down version. You know, maybe not their initial attention, very stripped down, but also built up with Phil Spector's Wall of Sound. You can read more about that and watch many other Beatle freak experts talk about Let It Be and that whole thing. This is my UK album, which I showed in other videos. It did come with a book in a box. The box fell apart. This is the album, same record otherwise. I'm not getting into pressings and details, but I was in Los Angeles with my confirmation class, where we visited another confirmation class from LA, and one night we were walking on Hollywood Boulevard, and this is not the one, but I did buy the bootleg. It's one of the first bootlegs, two first bootlegs that I'm aware of that ever came out were Get Back, the Beatles, which was the original tapes, the original mix and order that Glenn Johns put for Get Back, which would later become Let It Be. The other one is Great White Wonder by Bob Dylan. But this is a later bootleg that emulates the cover. You know this image from the Blue album, the Red and Blue albums that came out later in '73. But this was a mock-up bootleg, really beautiful version of what the album probably would have looked like, emulating their first Please Please Me album. And the bootleg came in this kind of envelope that's looks like it's an Apple promo copy. This one direct address to Jackie Lomax in Leytonstone, London, 13 Thornton Road. Don't know if that's a real address, but kind of a cool, really amazing mock-up. You can't see sometimes these things. Okay. 1970, a lot of solo albums by artists from other groups. The whole solo thing really started emerging in 1970. And the way I'm showing all these albums are somewhat in the order they came out from January through December, not exactly, but when there's an artist that had more than one album in the same year and that I wanted to showcase, I'm putting them together. So if something came out from someone in January and there's a November release, I'm putting them together. But John Lennon's Plastic Ono Band, an amazing cathartic, existential therapy, screaming Arthur Janoff, Primal Therapy album. You know it, it's a must-have. Precursor to punk, maybe, in a way. Very intimate, very rough, but I just fell in love with this record. And what was great about it, look at these. John and Yoko put out an album. You know, I know a lot of people out there are Yoko haters. I love Yoko, and I love what they did with these back-to-back albums. Mazzy Flip. Just avant-garde in a way on this one, but this one's raw as well. But to me, probably John Lennon's best solo album. At least my favorite. McCartney worked on himself, played all the instruments, with Linda doing some vocals. This is a UK copy, not an original. My original is an American Apple, but a wonderful, wonderful record. Things just change, you know. This is the time where if you were into an artist, a lot of my buddies, at least my friends, would buy every solo related of that artist. And of course, probably possibly the best album of 1970 that seemed to come out of nowhere, but obviously was gestating and just under the surface, percolating as All Things Was Past. 3-record set, 2 records of all original songs produced by Phil Spector, with Gary Wright and Eric Clapton and Leon Russell. An amazing, amazing album, with a poster. And 3rd record, which is a jam session with everyone, Apple Jam. It's Johnny's birthday. Poster inside, you know the record. I don't need to show details because that'll just extend this already long video. Syd Barrett's Madcap Laugh. I knew of him from the first Pink Floyd records in '67, but I did not buy this record till decades later. I knew about it, I heard it. When I worked in record stores, I heard it. I wouldn't say decades, probably late 70s, early 80s. I finally got a copy, then I got rid of it, and this is a reissue from the last, from 2014. But an amazing album, nice package, nice cover. Really an important album, produced by David Gilmour and Roger Waters of Pink Floyd. So this is not a record I got in 1970, like the others. In fact, that was out of order. That shouldn't have been there because I told myself I was going to show the Beatles stuff first. So, hey, Mazzy fucks up. But that's what happens sometimes. Bukuza Blues. Ringo put 2 solo records out. First one was Sentimental Journey. Oldies, big band. Conductors and arrangers like Quincy Jones worked on it and many others. But this is an amazing album. Recorded in Nashville, produced by Pete Drake and countless Charlie Daniels, Buddy Herman, the Jordanaires are on here, who backed the singers back in Elvis Presley, Charlie McCoy, DJ Fontana, Ben Keith, Roy Husky Jr., Jerry Reed, all the great Nashville musicians at the time. Well, a lot of them are on this record. Ringo's love for country music really kind of comes out here. A lot of us, or a lot of people that were into rock and roll just didn't get this. It wasn't a huge hit. Either was his Sentimental Journey, but it was him doing something he wanted to do in his way. A lot of people consider the Ringo Capitol album that came out a couple years later, 3 years later, as his finest album, just with all his friends, more rock and roll. But I'd say this is up there on equal level. The Coochie Coochie, is it Coochie Coochie? This song, there's a great version. Oh, it's actually a B-side of a single. It's long, kind of really great country jam-ish with great acoustic guitar. It's on a B-side of one of the singles. I forgot the single right now. Any other Beatle freak will be able to tell you. You can Google it. Someone can write it down here. This is a great album. Every time he puts out records still, I buy those records. They're fine. Listen to them for a few weeks, file them away. I wish he would go back and do a Nashville record with, whether it's old, great country, classical, cowboy country artists, or even the new breed of young people out of Austin or indie country, Jayhawks, Wilco. Maybe that's not the right thing. It needs to be a little more upbeat. I think Ringo loves that kind of music. You know, he did Buck Owens songs with the Beatles, and he did Honey Dote, Rockabilly. So that's really a good staple of Ringo Starr. But then, you know, Apple was growing for the last 2 years, but a group that did 2 great albums on Apple, Badfinger. Badfinger's Magic Christian Music, featuring the song that became pretty much of a hit, If You Want It, Come and Get It, Paul McCartney wrote. On the recent, I think the White Album, is it the White Album? Reissue, expanded, has McCartney, or is it the Abbey Road one? Actually, the Abbey Road one. It has McCartney's demo for that, which almost sounds identical. But the Badfinger version is so great. They were the Ivies, and I think Lennon helped contribute to the name of Badfinger. But great, great record. And then, of course, later that year, this is probably their best record, No Dice. And this record is beautiful, produced by Jeff Emmerich, and Mal Evans produced the song. Mal Evans was the Beatles' assistant, associate, roadie, love everything. But Without You, great song that later became a huge, huge hit for Harry Nilsson, No Matter What. What a great guitar bit on that. But just an amazing, amazing record on Apple Records. Again, the singer-songwriter thing was happening in 1970. I would buy all these records by artists who I liked from other groups. Another artist from a group was one of my favorite groups in the 60s was the Lovin' Spoonful. This album, the first solo album by John B. Sebastian. This is the version of Reprise. Now, I used to have both versions. I don't know all the legal details, but this album came out with 2 different covers on 2 different labels. It came out on MGM Records with a brown cover, and then this version. And it has like Dallas Taylor, Harvey Brooks, Stephen Stills, the Ikettes are on here, David Crosby, Buzzy Linhart, Graham Nash. It's a great record. You all know them from that picture. I don't have Woodstock here. I didn't bring out the Woodstock album. That should probably be on the list because Woodstock did come out, even though it happened in '69. The album came out and the film in 1970. So again, you know, the end of an era. I talked about another video, Altamont, at the end of '69, kind of seemed to close out the 60s in a non-so-happy way, a concert that I happened to attend. But this is a great record. It still holds up, and this is my original copy in pristine shape. So, you know, I kept my records pretty nice. I think this was won a Grammy of Album of the Year, Bridge Over Troubled Water, the final Simon & Garfunkel record, and not my favorite Simon & Garfunkel record. Mine is Bookends, but great, another record, 1970, an important record, big record. Bridge Over Troubled Waters, as schmaltzy as it is an amazing, amazing piece of music. I don't know why they did Bye Bye Love on here, the live thing. To me, it wrecks the momentum of the record, but that's just it's fine. Didn't need to be on this album, in my opinion. But Baby Driver, The Boxer, oh, of course The Boxer. I mean, El Condor Pass got me into music from South America. Urubamba, who played on that record. Now, I did a whole feature on this next gentleman, and he released 2 amazing records in 1970. Van Morrison. I don't need to say any more. Go watch that long video on Van Morrison. But Moondance and his band and Street Choir. This is when he started moving from moved to the Bay Area, living in San Anselmo, Marin County. The singer-songwriter continues, and I could even gone on here and did Beatle connections with all these things. Obviously, Magic Christian, Simon and Garfunkel, but there are a lot of Beatle connections, of course, with this album, Beatle Connection. First artist signed to Apple Records by Peter Asher, who was their A&R man, artist and repertoire. That's the person that kind of helps nurture the artist. Doesn't always produce them, sometimes pulls them, shapes them, sometimes helps them with material, gathering material, organizing the material they have. That's what an A&R man or woman does, but in those days it was pretty much all men. Apple implodes. Peter Asher takes James Taylor, gets him a deal with Warner Brothers Records, puts out this record, gets a couple songs and help from Carole King, and this record changes everything in terms of singer-songwriter. You know, today a lot of people say, oh, it's a nice record, they don't get it. 1970, this was an important record. Sweet Baby James, Country Road, Fire and Rain, Danny Cooch, Carole King, Russ Kunkel, Randy Meisner would later be an Eagle, and recorded at Sunset Sound in December of '69, came out in 1970, and really changed everything. The singer-songwriter thing, one of the originators of that, not intentionally, but where you take acoustic guitar, you write songs, you know, had some production, not a lot, and make great records. One of the great songwriters and great vocalists of the late 60s makes a record from an unknown or relatively unknown songwriter. Nilsson sings Newman, Harry Nilsson, an amazing songwriter. Can you imagine telling your record company, RCA Records, you're going to make a whole album of Randy Newman songs? Nobody knew Randy Newman, really. I mean, the masses certainly didn't. This wasn't a huge hit either. But every song on here, songs and piano by Randy Newman. So Randy Newman plays it on here, and Nilsson just beautifully interprets these wonderful songs. Vine Street, Love Story, Yellow Man, Caroline, Cowboy, a gorgeous song. Dayton, Ohio, 1903. This got me to go back and get into get into Randy Newman, and I bought his songs, all his things. So, go take a brief bathroom break, and I'll be right back. So I hope you had a good tinkle or coffee or cocktail, whatever you want. Continuing 1970. Again, I got all these albums at the time. Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young, Deja Vu. You know, some question why they brought in Neil Young. I love that they brought in Neil Young. But the real main reason was, after that great CSNY album, you know, their manager, the label, Emmett Artigan, wanted to send them out on tour, they should go on tour, but Steve Stills almost played all the instruments on that first record. Obviously not drums and everything. There were some acoustic guitars and other things by Graham Nash and David Crosby, but they needed another musician in the band. Emmett Artigan suggests Neil Young. I think there was a little bit of what the fuck from Stephen Stills after Buffalo Springfield and the tensions and things like that, but Neil's a great musician. Search out, what's that one out? There was a show, 45-minute show, I believe, of Buffalo Springfield doing Down by the River, and I think, was it Bluebird maybe? No, I'm sorry, not Buffalo Springfield, Crosby, Stills and Nash. One of the live TV shows on ABC. It's on YouTube. See them together playing. They're fabulous. This period. It's too bad, even though they made some decent albums later, after this, and Four-Way Street, the great live album, they kind of imploded, in my opinion. Everything else was just not quite there in terms of quality. But those first albums, especially, the first one's great, Sweet Judy Blue Eyes, obviously. But to me, this really represents the kickoff of the 1970s as well. Singer-songwriter again, but from a little different take on it. A Tulsa boy, Leon Russell. Leon Russell was also a member of the Wrecking Crew in LA, studio musicians, great piano player, played on so many records, played on Alley Oop. He was one of the Hollywood Argyles on that record, but made a solo record on Shelter Records. And I bought this album when it came out. I don't know if this is my original copy or not. There's a thing where the logo for Shelter Records was a Superman, and they got, obviously, cease and desist orders from DC, I guess, DC Comics, and they replaced, they covered up the Superman logo. A Song for You, Dixie Lullaby, Delta Lady. Delta Lady is a great song. He does a different version of actually it's not the same song, Give Peace a Chance, that he wrote with Bonnie Bramlett. Roll Away the Stone, an amazing record. It seems to me, in my recollection, 1970, 71, 72, Leon Russell was everywhere. There's another album later that I'll talk about Leon, but he wrote great songs. Years later, his song My Masquerade late in the 70s or mid-70s would also of a sudden bring jazz guitarist George Benson to the forefront with a vocal version of that song. But great piano player. He went from a crew cut guy from Tulsa to a really great artist in the whole Leon Russell, Joe Cocker, Delaney and Bonnie frame of sort of Americana, soul, folky, funky rock and roll. Got to show Jimmy, because after the Experience, he did great 1969-1970 New Year's Eve concert that became the Band of Gypsies records with Buddy Miles, Them Changes, Buddy Miles, New Year's Eve. The great box set that's out now of the entire Fillmore shows is really worth it if you're a Hendrix fan. Now, I bought this album in 1970 and I returned it. Then I bought it again when I worked in record stores, probably around 1975 and 76 is when I finally got it. 1970, I didn't get Bitches Brew. It's funky, it's out there, but now I think it's sexy and it's beautiful. Bitches Brew, Miles Davis. This is my first Miles Davis album I ever had and that I ever got rid of. So I had it, a week later, I don't know if I traded it in or returned it, I don't remember. But so I don't have an original, that's a mid-70s edition. I loved the Small Faces. I was a big fan of Small Faces. Obviously, the Small Faces grew up. Half of them got taller, and they got Ronnie Wood and Rod Stewart. Great record. I bought this the year it came out as well. Again, I bought a lot of records. Remember, records were $2.70 to $3. So if I bought 50, I probably spent $150 on records. But I was working. When I got back, I worked in a law firm downtown in San Francisco. They had a 4-4 plan, so Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'd go down off of Market Street to Bush Street, the Shell Building, and work for a maritime law firm called Hall, Henry, Oliver, McCreevy. I'd file briefs, not briefs, but file law books. I'd sit in for the operator for the lunchtime and do those switchboards with all the chords you see in the movies. And I learned all that stuff. I don't know why I say that, but it's just sort of, this stuff is memory. I bought this downtown at Discount Records because there was a Discount Records on Market Street that I'd walk to on my breaks all the time, or when I was going to City Hall to bring papers to file. So, great record. There you go. Now, I'm one of those guys that sent in, what is it? You get 10 records or 10 records for a penny or something for the Columbia House Music Club. It wasn't just Columbia Records, but associated labels. And this is one of the records I got. This is my first, I think it's her fourth record, Joni Mitchell, Ladies of the Canyon. And it was, that's where you you send away 1 penny and you put your neighbor's address. Then you take the records and, of course I didn't do that. But this is where I first fell in love with Joni Mitchell. Then I went back in her catalog and eventually got her first 3 records. But this is what started Joni Mitchell for me. Partly because of Woodstock is on here. The song Woodstock, her version of it. Big Yellow Taxi, which is the closest she had a hit at the time. And The Circle Game, which, I don't know if he wrote it, but Tom Rush recorded it. It might be a Tom Rush song. Oh no, it would be her song. That's right, she right. Tom Rush covered that song. That's where I first heard The Circle Game. Beautiful, beautiful song folk singer Tom Rush did of Joni Mitchell. I said I'd talk about Delaney and Bonnie and Friends because Leon Russell sort of contributed to the whole thing with these kind of bands. Eric Clapton said, what the fuck, fuck this Cream stuff. Early on when he heard music from Big Pink, went on the road. George Harrison was there occasionally. Dave Mason was there. And fabulous record and a great Delaney and Bonnie and Friends. I love all the Delaney and Bonnie records. Delaney was a bit of a wanker, as they say. Wanker. But this is an incredible, one of the great live albums. There is a Rhino handmade extended version. I think it's only on CD that has all the shows, and you should get that if you like CDs and want all the shows, but at least get that record. Under Ronstadt. Bought this record. This again is not my, well, this is my original copy. Maybe I didn't get this until probably 73, 74, but I fell in love with her because of Long Time. Arranged and conducted by Norbert Putman. Elliot Mazer produces, who kind of worked on albums. He worked on, with John Simon, Big Brother Holding Company album, Cheap Thrills. He was an engineer. He had a studio in San Francisco years later, called his Master's Voice. But this is a gorgeous album. I believe it was recorded in Nashville. I'm just guessing that, but I think, because it's got all the kind of Nashville people in there. And Elliot Mazer also was part of a band called Area Code 615. which is an interesting. I wish I had those records. I used to have them, and I don't have, no longer have them. But beautiful record. You know, obviously she was more of a country singer, and then when she got pop famous in the '70s, again connected to Peter Asher, who ended up managing her and producing all her hit albums. Probably the biggest artist to break in 1970 was Elton John. He did Empty Sky before this, but none of us knew that record. It kind of went under the radar until this record came out. I bought this record because of Your Song, one of the most beautiful songs I'd heard at the time. It was great. Produced by Gus Dudgeon, who is an amazing producer, and orchestrated by Paul Buckminster. Paul Buckminster did the orchestration and arrangement on this, of those songs. To me, obviously in those days, Your Song, Take Me to the Pilot, but the Border Song, those were the three that just touched me and were amazing. But the song that I got into again years later, 60 years on, obviously as I was turning 60, I kept thinking of that song as I was approaching 60 years old. It's, to me, a perfect, gorgeous, beautiful song. The first minute of that orchestration, minute and a half even, is amazing. And the Spanish guitar on that by Colin Green is just stunning. So the first album by Elton John, groundbreaking album at the time. You know, I don't see a lot of Elton people showing work here, but 1970, remember, coming from being there in that moment in 1970 was so important. And that same year, he makes this album, almost like, Elton and Bernie Taupin's version of a country record. Gorgeous record, again, another one. Tumbleweed Connection. I'm not going to say any more about every song. But to me, two records that came out in the same year. That was the thing about this time, the 70s. Artists were putting 2-3 records out a year, and quality records. It wasn't this waiting 4 years and then, or you do a separate project. Of course, solo records were big. My first Jethro Tull record, I think this is their second one, Benefit. This was another record club record for me, so I did get this in 1970. I got this record when it came out because I was a fan of Eric Burdon. I was a big fan of the Animals. Even that later period, especially with, obviously the early hits were great, MGM, but when later year he did Monterey and San Francisco Nights, Sky Pilot, but then he does this thing, and all over the radio, at least in San Francisco, was, how can I forget the name of this song? Eric Burdon Declares War. Drink the Wine, isn't that on this? I Spill the Wine. See, I improvise this stuff because I do it from what I know when I know. I don't write in notes unless it's questions and answering your thread. But Spill the Wine, when I heard that on the radio, I was gobsmacked. Great single. Actually, I got the single. I didn't get the record till I worked in record stores, and I picked it up. So, again, a great record, really a changer. And obviously, what happened. I think he did one other record with War, as I recall. And then War went on to do incredible stuff on their own. But that was incredible collaboration, I think. Eric Burdon fronting War at the time. We know Lee Oskar, a great harmonica player from War, things like that. I'm only showing this because it is a great album. I did buy it at the time because of the cover. Amazing, this came out, a few months after Abbey Road came out. Or no, maybe a year, 6-8 months. I don't remember now. Anyway, Booker T and the MGs, the great Booker T and the MGs, doing some of Abbey Road on here. You all have seen this. I see a lot of people showing this when they were comparing covers. Now, Poco didn't originally get a lot of love, but this first album on Epic Records, I loved, and I got it when it came out because I knew Jim Messina from Buffalo Springfield. I didn't know Timothy Schmidt, who later go on to be an Eagle. Richie Furay I knew from Buffalo Springfield because I was a Buffalo Springfield fan. George Grantham and Rusty Young. Great record. They were originally called Pogo as they were touring, and because of the comic strip Pogo, they had to change the name. So this is their first album on Epic Records, Poco. Being a Jefferson Airplane fan, I know Vinyl Richie here is a great big Jefferson Airplane fan. Hot Tuna. I got almost all their solo projects, good, bad, or ugly. But Hot Tuna recorded in Berkeley at a club, New Orleans House in Berkeley. I never went there. The Bear Archive recently released an expanded version of this for Record Store Day about a year ago. Great acoustic-based album, Jorma and Jack Cassidy, Jorma Kakkonen, Jack Cassidy. And they continued that project parallel with the Airplane, even though the Airplane was splitting apart and splintering and getting wonky in a way. Bob Dylan did 2 albums that year, as I recall, only 2. Everyone hated Self-Portrait. My buddy David, or not David, another buddy of mine, Larry, and I love this record. A lot of covers, a lot of out there. Most critics, famous review by Grail Marcus, hated it. But I love this intro, all the tired horses. He just Let It Be Me, cover of the song that Elvis made famous. Cool record. It got a reprieve, a few years ago when the big bootleg series Archive came out. People now seem to like this record a lot more. Funny how that happens. They rediscover it. Hidden gem. All of a sudden a shitty album is great 50 years later. But another record didn't get a lot of respect at the time, but I just loved was New Morning. If Not For You, of course I knew that song because George Harrison covers it on All Things Must Pass, so right away I knew that. Day of the Locust. But I really like If Dogs Run Free, kind of a beat poet song with this kind of woman doing scat vocals in the background. Pretty amazing. But New Morning is great. Father of Night, God, this is, to me, one of my personal favorite and a real changing point. Obviously, a year earlier, he did Nashville Skyline with changed voice, but his voice kind of shifted yet again with New Morning. I was a Grateful Dead fan. I'd seen them around San Francisco a lot. I'd seen them in Golden Gate Park quite a bit. Not quite a bit, but several times. But the whole acoustic country thing, as you know, is happening, and I think is it Bluesman or Hippie? Happy Hippie showed these, but how can you not go 1970 without showing these records? The 2 best studio Grateful Dead records. Now, it's not a psychedelic, but these kind of change things. Great songwriting, great production. I mean, can you imagine if this was a double record set? Maybe it's good that it wasn't, but to me, these are perfect records and amongst their best songwriting. Just love these records. 2 records, 1970. Working Man's Dead and American Beauty. I'm always a big Traffic fan. All my friends had to buy this in 1970. And not just because of the great songs. Dave Mason, to me, is only great record. I wish he stayed in Traffic, and after the second self-titled record he left, which is unfortunate. I don't know if he regrets that or not, but this record again has Leon Russell on it, Jim Gordon, the killer, the mama killer, Jim Gordon, John Simon, Jim Capaldi from Traffic, Delaney and Bonnie, Rita Coolidge, big click with that whole Delaney and Bonnie thing, and I'm seeing that a lot from records around this time period. But the big thing about this, aside from the fold-out cover at the time, and this wasn't happening. Now it's like commonplace. We all are showing our friggin' color marble vinyl and stuff, but this was a big deal. It became a huge collector's item after 1970 for a while, because this didn't last long, and after this they were pressed on black like everything else. But this was a rarity in 1970 to do any kind of colored or especially marble vinyl. It wasn't happening. Just wasn't. I'm surprised that other artists didn't get on this bandwagon. I'm sure there are examples and you can cite them below, but this is a great album. Only You Know and I Know, Can't Stop Worrying, Shouldn't Have Took More Than You Gave, World Changes, Look at You, Look at Me. Just a wonderful, wonderful record. So another beverage break, and see you on the other side. I hope these breaks are in the appropriate place for you, and if not, I can't do split up videos like this. I figured, you know, this is not, I am not Ken Burns, and, and this is not a series of things. So watch at your leisure. What I do sometimes, I put things on at night and I fall asleep to them, and then I continue the next day or whenever I need to get back at them. So, and if you don't get through it all, that's fine. Again, 1970, 50 years ago. I can't believe this has been 50 years. I don't feel like I'm 65 years old. And these records 50 years ago still hold up. I see them all over, a lot of these, not all of them, all over the vinyl community, and they're selling and being reissued in some cases. There are some that have cult status, including this next one. Oh, this is not the one I was thinking of, but this one too. I know a lot of you in the UK who are into the whole British folk scene of the late 60s, you know, Pentangle and Incredible String Band to a point. Maybe that's a little different, a little more spacey, psyche stuff. You know, the whole Bert Jansch and Richard Thompson and, you know, that whole genre of Sandy Denny and Sandy Dennis's Up the Down Staircase actress. And anyway, I digress, as I usually do. But that whole British folk scene, which I'm a big fan of, and I really got into it probably around 1970 and 71 with Pentangle and those artists. But 1970, now this album I heard, I didn't get this till probably 1975. Fotheringay, Sandy Denny, when one of the times she left Pentangle, right? Am I getting my groups? Fairport Convention, sorry. They're not all alike, I know that, and I don't think they're all alike. But this is a brilliant album. That's what the people in British say, brilliant. We say brilliant when it's about something smart, but there's a certain thing, brilliant, like that's cool, that's wild, that's amazing, that's brilliant. Am I right? I don't hear Americans say it in the exact same use for the word brilliant, but you guys invented the language, we didn't, so we totally fuck it up. But this Sandy Denny, Trevor Lucas, anyway, I'm not going to read the names because it takes too much time. Great record. This is an A&M copy I got again. Oh, I got this early 70. Because this is the original label. So I got this probably 71, 72. So not the year it came out, but soon afterwards. Gorgeous record. An important record of the British folk scene. Of course, I bought this on Ampex Records. You know, Ampex Records. I think the only other Ampex record I have is Jesse Winchester's first album, produced by Robbie Robertson. And he kind of got into the whole Bearsville thing. You know, Todd Rundgren, when he went solo after, the band Runt. This is kind of basically his solo outcoming, right? God, today, you know, some fucking parent right-wing group, no offense, will probably protest this because of that hanging thing. Now, it's not a funny thing to joke about suicide. I've had a couple friends, unfortunately, I've lost in the last few years. But it's a beautiful and perfect Todd Rundgren cover for the Ballad of Todd Rundgren. Now, the reason we all know this song was because of... Actually, I'm wrong. This is not... Why did I get this one? This doesn't have the one I'm thinking of, Runt. That's the other one. Is this the right record? Am I screwing this up? Hold on a second. Runt, runt, runt. You better runt, you better hide. I'm cutting you off for a moment. I know you would have written me. You would have commented. You would have said, Mazzy, you don't know shit about 1970. This record came out in 1971. I pulled the wrong one, so you boo-hoo, hoo-hoo. This is the one. Sorry. Todd Rundgren, I heard that song, We Gotta Get You a Woman, and I bought this record again on Ampex Records. So anything I said before is the same. Great record. Maybe his best. I don't know. I mean, I got hot and cold later with Todd Rundgren, but a great producer, great artist nonetheless. I saw him on the tour. It's been 6 years with the Ringo All Stars. He played a few years on the tour. Brilliant musician and producer, and this is a great album. We Gotta Get You a Woman. What a great, just a great pop song. And this is the proper 1970 album, Runt. I did not get this right away, but it came out in 1970 free. I saw them on a great bill at Winterland, and I've said this before. So if you've watched my videos, you've heard this story. Winterland, there was a Island Record show. It was opening act John Martin, Free was the center, and Traffic headlining around 73 or 4, I believe. I didn't love them initially. I went back and got this record after I saw Free. Something about him I liked. I got into the first Bad Company record with Paul Rogers, but I do like this record. Paul Kossoff, Paul Rogers. Anyway, I have this and the Free Story, that import reissue later. That's all I have on Free. I'm not a completist on them. But again, going back to that favorite band and that same concert, but 1970, John Barleycorn Must Die. This is their British folk album with the great standard traditional folk song of John Barleycorn, which they do over a 6-minute and 20-second version. Glad, great opening instrumental, Freedom Rider, Empty Pages. Just great vocal. This is when they were a trio. It was pretty much just Winwood Capaldi and Chris Wood on flute. Great flautist. But again, this is their third album, as I recall, right? I think it's their third album. Unless I'm missing one. No. Mr. Fantasy, self-titled, and this great record, 1970. Chris Blackwell produced it. Except one song produced by Guy Stevens. I don't even know who Guy Stevens is. But love this record. Then it all changed for them after that. I do like them after that, but a whole different thing. Now, again, going round and round in circles about with Delaney and Bonnie and the whole Rio and Russell and that whole white soul rock from 1970. Whatever you think about Eric Clapton, good, bad, and ugly, whatever you feel like, just the 60s stuff, if you like Cream, if you like his mellower stuff where he kind of seemed to take the guitar, less of a guitarist, this is an amazing debut solo album. Eric Clapton, self-titled, produced by Delaney and Bramlett. Great band of musicians again, a lot of the same faces, Jim Gordon, the killer, Jim Gordon. I'm going to say the mother killer, Jim Gordon, every chance I get. Carl Rattle, a great bass player. Sonny Curtis, Leon Russell again, Bobby Whitlock, Rita Coolidge, Bobby Keys, Jim Price. All these people were sort of interchangeable with Leon Russell and Delaney for a while. There is a great reissue CD that has this mix, the original mix. I think Tom Dowd might have done the original mix. I can't recall if that's the case. Also, Stephen Stills is on here as well. But the CD also has the unrelated Delaney Bonnie mix, which is very different. So that's a great CD to get if you like that album. An album I got at the time, I didn't play it much. I didn't really get it at the time. Beach Boys, Sunflower, original copy again from 1970. I don't have much to say to this. I've gotten on this, into this album years later by far. At the time, I was ho-hum about it. Now, again, going full circle, with Leon Russell puts this album together for A&M Records, puts this tour together, one of the most expensive tours with the most fucking people on a tour at the time. But it became a great movie, a great soundtrack, live album, one of the best live albums, one of the first best live albums, 1970, Mad Dogs and Englishmen, Joe Cocker, Leon Russell, again, the same people. It's got the killer, mother killer, Jim Gordon, Claudia Lanier, Don Preston. Bobby Torres, Jim Price, Bobby Keys again. Everyone who's on that Clapton album in a way. Great tour, great live album and live motion picture. One of my favorites of the later Byrds albums, I like all the Byrds albums, you know that, but one disc Untitled, one disc live, one disc, well, they became sort of a jam band in a way. What is it, 10 minutes, 12 minutes, 15 minutes version of 8 Miles High. But it's got Chestnut Mare on the studio album. Clarence White's guitar playing on that and Roger McGuinn's singing and playing, to me, is one of the best records ever made in terms of rootsy, ethereal, just a gorgeous record. Chestnut Mare, one of my all-time favorite records. It's kind of reminisce of Umaguma in a way, kind of that kind of multi-image thing of that kind of cover. Produced by Terry Melcher, Son of Doris Day. I always get that wrong, don't I? I think it's Doris Day or Loretta Young. One was in Moby Grape, one was Terry Melcher, the producer, the son of a famous person. 1970, The Great Kiln House. This is a great Fleetwood Mac album. But the song that I bought this for was Station Man. Station Man, and then Tell Me All the Things That You Do. Jeremy Spencer, Danny Kerwin. It's that period of Fleetwood Mac. A gorgeous record, a perfect album. Plus, that First Love I told you about in 1970. I remember buying this record because the girl I fell in love with, my first love, her name was Judy. Song Jewel-Eyed Judy on this, and I used to play it for her. How romantic is that, Mazzy? Oh, you know, you're 16 years old. You fall in love. It's a beautiful thing. Everything changes that. Your first love. You get your driver's license. The Shift. The Beatles split up. 1970. 1970 also put out this great album by Neil Young. By far, even though I love Neil Young, almost everything he does, almost, not quite. This, to me, is a perfect album and his best album. I like it better than Harvest, which was his biggest album at the time. This came out right before Harvest. And it's such a perfect album. Tell Me Why, the way it opens. After the Gold Rush, some of the best lyrics that Neil Young ever wrote. Great photography by Joel Bernstein, who was a great photographer and is a guitar tech and compiles all that, those reissues and things of Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. Of course, everyone shows this one in 1970. You can't get through 1970 without showing Abraxas. Great rock and soul Latin album. Carlos Santana. After this, it all changed, I think. The third album is actually still really good. This is their best album. Their first album's great, but I like their more Latin sound. They had a way of doing covers and making them than theirs. Oye Como Va was a cover song. Black Magic Woman was a Fleetwood Mac song. So great record, the great Michael Shreve, great drummer, which exploded in Woodstock on the year this came out. Just perfect record. Living in the Mission in San Francisco, where Carlos Santana grew up, I used to hear this record blasting out of cars, literally till I moved 6 years ago. That whole Oye Como Va, Black Magic Woman, what is it? Gypsy Queen thing, just all the time. Now, I bought this album just because of the box. When it came out in the fall of 1970. This is before it didn't really hit till 1971. It came out, maybe September, October, I don't remember exactly. Doty's Music Store, a little tiny mom and pop record store on Geary Boulevard in the Richmond district of San Francisco. Old women owned it and ran it. It was hysterical. And they were one of the cheapest record stores in the city in San Francisco at the time. I used to go there once a week on the weekends and buy records. But I bought this because it was a box. Jesus Christ Superstar. I had no idea what this was. I recognize Ian Gilliam's name because he was a lead singer of Deep Purple, who I just got. I don't show that Deep Purple record here, that in rock. Is that the one it's called? Because I no longer have it. How tragic is that? I fell in love with this. Being a Jew, sorry to use that as a preface, I didn't know the story of Jesus Christ. Every Christmas I played this record, and then years later, of course, I was told Maslov. It's really an Easter record, but I like to play it at Christmas time, Jesus Christ. I learned the story. I followed the lyrics and played this record every day for about a month. And then through Christmas of that year, 1970, I love this record. It's a great rock and roll record. The rock band, whatever you want to say about Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice, they nailed it on this. This is before they even thought of it being a Broadway play and a musical, and it's an incredible record. Musicianship's incredible. Yvonne Elliman, fell in love with her too. Don't like the movie, don't like the soundtrack to the movie, but that is a perfect record. Just played it last month around Christmas time. One of my all-time favorite album covers ever in the history of album covers, by Hypnosis, Pink Floyd's Adam Hart Mother. I have a version with and without type. This is the reissue. I have one with type, so I don't have the first press, although I did buy it in 1970. When I did my 90s purge, I got rid of it. But, this record, Pink Floyd. What can I say about Pink Floyd? Perfect record. Now, didn't get this in 1970. I don't know anyone who got this in 1970. I'm sure there were. When I worked in record stores starting in 1973, this record was in the store in our shelves. I never sold a copy of this record. I never sold a Nick Drake record. I never heard anyone in the store play a Nick Drake record. People bought it, but hardly anyone. Then he died young at 20. Is he one of the 27 Club? I can't remember. Nick Drake, produced by the great Joe Boyd, American expatriate who produced a lot, like incredible string band. This stuff. Anyway, the first Pink Floyd single opened the UFO Club in London. Worked with Jeff Muldaur, produced the Maria Muldaur record. That's a whole other story. But obviously, not this album, but Pink Moon became famous, 15 years ago, or 20 years ago, or 18 years ago, whatever it was, because a friggin' Volkswagen ad, Pink Moon. Way too late for Nick, but now all of a sudden his records, his originals are rare, they're valuable. This is a reissue. This is Briar, what's it called? Briar Later, great folk, a little psych, but more folky, introspective, ethereal. Great. I got those later. Again, I got on the bandwagon after, I'll admit it, I didn't get that at first. I never listened to it. I didn't listen to that album for 40 years, until after, 30 years at least. Bought this right when it came out because of Lucky Man. That song was just, with that synthesizer, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Greg Lake, King Crimson, Emerson, what's that band he was in? I'm blanking out. I never got those albums. I did have the first King Crimson album, but I love this record. Love. It's my favorite Emerson, Lake and Palmer record. After a while, the whole prog thing, some of those groups, when they started doing double records, then triple records, and the Works. The Works. It's like a fucking, you want the Works on your burger? You want everything? You want bacon and avocado and cheese and Dolmisses, and I don't know what that means. Singer-songwriter, one of the best albums ever made, one of the best singer-songwriters ever made. T for the Tillerman, Cat Stevens, is actually, I think it's his third album. He started out almost like Bowie with a different type of style, and then he did Mona Bone Jacome, which is more like that. Then, is this his third or fourth? I think it's the third. But this record changed a lot too. Obviously, was it right after this, a couple years later, the great cult movie, Harold and Maude used a lot of his music, and at the time there was never a soundtrack. But Father and Son, Where Do the Children Play? I saw him at Berkeley Community Theater at a great show early, a couple years after this, Wild World. Paul Samuel Smith produced it. A perfect record, perfect folk singer-songwriter record. Going back, I said artists that were in bands that went solo, had great solo records in 1970. The first Steve Stills record is incredible, a beautiful record. If you don't love the one you're with. If you don't love the one you're with, if you're not with the one you love the one you're with. I didn't think about that in 1970, but I'm thinking about that now. I'm kidding. Jimi Hendrix, one of his last, he's on this record, I think one of his last recordings. What song is he on? It doesn't matter. But this is a really good record. The whole record's good. They all made good records. I don't have them all here. I can't remember if they all came out that year, but the David Crosby, is that 1970? But I can't remember. I just saw it, and if I missed it, I missed it. if I can only remember my name. Great, perfect record also. Someone just showed that on the VC here. And the first Graham Nash album, Songs for Beginners, is amazing, but I'm getting off. Kinks, Arthur's my favorite. This is a great album. Not one of my top 3 or 4, but the song Lola was a huge, huge hit. They had I think in the BBC made them change cola to something else, Coca-Cola to Sherry Cola, is that right? Power Man, Lola versus the Money Gorilla. This is one that's pretty rare now because this is the only one in that whole period of Kinks records that has yet to be reissued. So we're way overdue. Hopefully this year they'll do some kind of anniversary of it because it's way overdue. You probably can hear in the background, but a big, big cult album of mine is Paul Kantner's Blows Against the Empire. It says Paul Kantner's Jefferson Starship. Don't be confused with the I built this city, we built this city, Jefferson Starship. This is a Paul Kantner solo record with friends. It was nominated for a Hugo Award, which is a science fiction award, which is, I think, the first record that was ever nominated for that. It's sort of conceptual. Recorded in San Francisco, I think at Wally Hyder's. Grace Slicks is on it. Neil Young is on it. David Crosby is on it. Let's see. Jerry Garcia, Bill Kreutzmann, Mickey Hart, so most of the dead. Jack Cassidy, Graham Nash, David Freeberg, Harvey Brooks, Peter Kokkinen. It's just an amazing sounding record, and it's a record that I seriously play frequently. And again, you compact disc people like I am, the expanded version with the alternate and demo kind of outtaking things is amazing. Great sound, great record, great songwriting. Pretentious space stuff, maybe, but a beautiful record. Blows Against the Empire. Now, another Beatle connection, because we have so many. Layla. I mean, you can't get through 1970 without Layla. I mean, the song Layla alone. Eric Clapton, one of George's best friends. Eric has a hankering, a throbbing interest for Patty Harrison, and writes this beautiful love song. Layla, another love song. Layla is Patty Harrison. Layla, an amazing piece of music. Bell Bottom Blues, great double album, great album. Then he did one live album, but think of being Patty Harrison. 2 of the great love songs, rock songs ever, Layla and Something, written about you. So, and I'm going to end up this is a long one, but again, you had at least 2 or 3 bathroom breaks in the middle. The very first Ry Cooder record. I got this, I don't remember why I bought this. I did buy it in 1970 on a whim. And those of you who watch my channel a lot know that Ry Cooder is by far my favorite guitar player. All string instruments he plays, his first solo album. But it's great about this, it's bluesy, it's almost in the Mississippi John Hurt, you know. He does John Estes songs, Blind Willie Johnson songs, Alfred Reed, Randy Newman song, Old Kentucky Home, Woody Guthrie song, Don't Ray Me, Alimony. So a great record. I've been following this guy since 1970. Van Dyke Parks and Lenny Warnaker produced the great Van Dyke Parks, arranged Cliff Estridge, Roy Estrada. A lot of you know he kind of he played on the first Little Feat. He played in the first Captain Beefheart. He was going to go on tour with Captain Beefheart. I'm not sure if he ever did, but he got his first really great Strat going to the Fender, I think it was in Fullerton, California, the Fender warehouse factory in Fullerton, California, and the management was going to pay for a guitar, and he picked out that one that he eventually painted aqua blue, that's surfing blue. So 1970, a great year. There's a lot of music here. What a great year for fucking music. I'm not going to do like every year or decade of top. I can't do that. I'm not going to do it usually in order, but I'm sure a lot of you know these records. There's a lot of newer people maybe to music, or younger people that don't know all this. Every record here is fantastic. Of course, it's subjective. The heavy rock stuff is not here, and that was, as Ron said, the beginning of heavy metal, really, and rock and roll stuff. I'm not so much into that. It's here and there once in a while. I love it. I got it more in the punk world, but not in the heavy metal world or the black metal world. But punk stuff, I love loud rock and roll, but I like that more minimal stuff. So anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for being patient with me as usual. Namaste. That sounds so cynical when I say that, doesn't it? Anyway, Mazzy loves you, and take care. PC.